What's a luxury that most Americans don't realize is a luxury? Story 1. Grocery stores. I didn't even realize it myself. I mean, they're such a common everyday thing. Until a friend of mine from overseas, what you could call a third world country. I don't even remember what the reason was now. She was military, so probably something to do with that. And I met up with her. We went to a grocery store for something or another, and she was flabbergasted. She was just amazed that you could walk into a huge store and food was like everywhere. Lol, I assured her it was no big deal, but she insisted it was. It's not as if she was from a starving country or anything, but their grocery store is just a local, tiny, corner store type shop where they stock a few basics. So yeah, for some people, walking into a store like Publix is a huge shock. Story 2. While it's true that you will have to drive great distances to get where you want to go, the interstate highway system and the rest areas are a unique feature of the American landscape. In other countries, they do not exist, or have been replaced by commercial enterprises. A gas station with a donut shop on the side of the road is not the same as a rest stop. Story 3. Being able to get insulin. As much as the cost of it sucks, it's still available at all. I haven't missed a single day of taking it in over 41 years. It's why I'm not dead. Government-funded dialysis care. I'm not on dialysis, but I used to work in the field for years. If you need it, you get it. Without those 4-hour treatments a week, those people would die. Lack of actual wars in our country for over a century has been pretty nice too. Story 4. I'm not sure if you meant actual Americans, North Americans, or just the Western world in general. A lot of these things aren't unique to America. Toilet paper, drinkable water, etc. I'm sure other Westerners take this for granted too. One thing that I think every American takes for granted is our national parks. Some of nature's most beautiful and completely untouched areas are in the U.S. And we vote in politicians that try to steal historic land and spend thousands to take our families to the theme parks they put in its place. Story 5. As a Mexican who born in USA but lived in Mexico almost all my life, I will say a lot of things are a luxury in America. What Mexico can't go even close to that. First, a car can be the simple thing ever, but another people can't handle. AC is a huge thing here, but in Mexico is a luxury, have it really expensive. Having more than 2 TVs, dude. Even how often can a family eat steak in USA? I will give a whole list about how America, it's more easier have stuff than in other countries. Even the most simple thing like doing nails. Extreme stuff is taking showers with buckets. A lot of people do not have access to regular showers, or even have a refrigerator is a luxury in Latin countries. Story 6. People obeying traffic signals. Guy I used to work with who was from an African country I cannot recall, this was 15 plus years ago, said one of the most surprising things he saw when he immigrated was that people actually obeyed traffic lights. He said where he came from, they were treated more like mild suggestions. Story 7. The public education system. Like having the ability to go to a school that's covered by taxes. Sure, it's not perfect and there's always issues, but there are many people throughout the world that have never had this sort of opportunity that I think we in wealthier nations often take for granted. Story 8. As a Canadian, I'm always blown away by how cheaper gas is in the US, although on my recent trip it was similar to Canadian prices. But in normal times it's usually way cheaper, and I always found it funny when you'd see news reports of people complaining about gas prices when they'd have no idea about how more expensive it is everywhere else in the world. Story 9. Thanks to the ADA, we accommodate accessibility much more than other places. Scandinavia is notable for access as well. Our regulations, building codes, ordinances, keep basic interfaces consistent, e.g., curb height, stair rise, door width, etc. These are things I notice as I nomad about, keeping an eye out for a forever home where I will presumably grow old. Proper infrastructure may be important to me then. Caveat. Granted, many places have much older cities and architecture to work with. Story 10. Honestly, most things in our daily lives, we take so much for granted as basic necessities. People in much of the world struggle for these very same things on a daily basis. Clean tap water, indoor plumbing, hot water, electricity, air conditioning, refrigeration, food almost readily available always, basic medicine, buildings that are mostly structurally sound, a working chain of law and order emergency command. Story 11. U.S. grocery store produce sections are a testament to both modern globalized supply chain efficiency and opulent excess. Any grocery store within 5 minutes of my house offers a fully stocked cornucopia of local and exotic fruits and vegetables every day of the year. This has been my experience living all over the U.S. Some of the countries the produce comes from have less access to them as Americans do at their local grocery store. It's a wonder and a travesty. It's a luxury unknown to most of the world and largely unrecognized by those who have it. Story 12. Central heating and insulation. Most JP homes have neither, and during the snowy, blizzardy winters in Honshu, my kitchen, bathroom, and dining room are frozen wastelands unless I want to dump yen using the single inefficient wall-mounted unit on the first floor, or buy a kerosene heater, then wait hours for it to warm up the areas. Japan is finally passing a law that starting next year, new buildings must have insulation. Story 13. Car ownership. I was in Vietnam on a motorbike tour, and the girl that was driving me on her motorbike asked me if a lot of Americans had motorbikes like they do in Vietnam. When I said, no, a lot of Americans have their own car, she said something like, wow, usually only very wealthy people have cars here. Then she asked if I had a car, and I responded yes. She seemed kind of taken aback by my nonchalance about it. Story 14. Water. Clean water. Oddly enough, this was brought to my attention as a young child. My long-past father held out purchasing a farm until he found one with 4 natural springs on it. By chance or design, our farm was only a half-mile from a river. Ourselves, livestock, crops, and water needs were always at hand if we needed or wanted it. Story 15. Space. You don't realize how big most homes are in the U.S. compared to other places. Like you have a living room, a den, and a dining room, and a breakfast nook, whatever the fuck that is. Like, it's normal for people to have a guest bedroom. Like, a bedroom that's just empty most of the time. And all the kids have their own rooms, plus a basement and a backyard. And some people have games rooms, not just for homes, but in the city. People expect to have space when they're on the sidewalk. Malls are huge. There's spaces on the bus, space everywhere. So much space that you need giant cars that take up even more space to fill giant parking spaces. Story 16. I asked one of my friends from Africa if he liked it better here or back home where his family is. He said he liked that he could criticize the local mayor publicly. He said back home if he criticized the local politician, it's possible that he might be jailed in the middle of the night and may never be seen again. Of course, he said he preferred it here. Another one of my much older friends was kidnapped at 15 into the Viet Cong. He deserted and was shot at while diving into a river. He escaped to France, then eventually the USA. His answer to my question was the same. I was born here and I feel so fortunate. I often wonder if this is similar to being born a Roman in the time of the Roman Empire. Story 17. Heat and hot water. When I was living in Pennsylvania, in the winter time, I had a really messed up furnace and also sometimes too broke to afford heating oil. I used to keep an electric heater next to me at all times, whether I was in the room or bathroom or in my living room. It followed me with a blanket attached and having to boil myself hot baths. It was a low time for me, and it's humbled me to be grateful for having heat and hot water now. Story 18. Space. So much empty space. Unless you are right downtown in a larger urban center, everything feels so uncrowded and, depending on what part of the country you are in, it's so green and lush and clean and comfortable. Driving down the 4-lane wide street, barely any cars within the same block. A wide strip of green grass with mature trees lining each side of the road, then a sidewalk wide enough to have a lane for pedestrians, and another for bikes, and then even more grass before you reach the edge of somebody's property, which is spacious with easily over 1,500 square feet each of front and back lawn, and a driveway 2 cars wide and a double garage and a 2,000 square feet home. Down the road a bit is a park with a soccer field and a baseball diamond and a dog park and lots of more open green space with no dedicated use at all. Story 19. Regular utilities. Power 99.99% of the time. Gas and water always running and clean. Clean drinking water so readily available we poop in it. Electricity so cheap we use it to heat and cool our houses, dry our clothes, and leave nightlights on. Regular access to semi-decent food, even if it's only a 99-cent cheeseburger or even just dog-cat food that is safe to eat. Regular trash pickup and cleaning teams. Government reps that won't scam or shoot you for not paying up. Free compulsory education until at least 18, education that would be far more advanced than a majority of countries' universities. Story 20. Big yards, lots of big green trees and grasses, large streets, privacy and non-judgment when you do a part-time job and live on your own from as young as 16, 18, no arranged marriages, husband allowed to be inside delivery room while you give birth, less judgment on revealing clothes, friendly people around, etc. Let me know which of these are just in the movies and not in real life. From perspective of a middle-class woman in India, these sounded like dreams. Story 21. Drains in the sink with electric teeth that destroy all mess. This is our true glorious creation as Americans outside of jazz, rock, hip-hop, and drag. All new art forms we've foisted upon the world that the world has made their own. Mongolian rap is awesome and terrifying. Don't tell Mongolia about the drains. We'll all be in trouble. Story 22. I'd say a vast majority of Americans' day-to-day is a luxury compared to elsewhere. The air, water, interior finishes, streetscape, conversations, thoughts, worries, and perceived struggles are almost all luxuries. We are rich people living in a rich people bubble complaining about not being richer, while comparing ourselves to even richer people, all the while ignoring the hard realities of the world outside the bubble that is where our things truly come from, the inescapable harsh conditions most face. Listen to people arguing about how shit their pet health insurance is, and tell me Americans aren't rich living in a rich bubble full of luxury. Story 23. Potable water, such as the water running through your bathroom faucet, able to brush your teeth with it, and the luxury of a flushing toilet. If you've ever been to other parts of the world, such as some places in Mexico, some of the water from the faucet can make you sick even by brushing with it. Story 24. Access to education and healthcare. Yes, obviously Americans face barriers to both, but no one here has to travel hours on foot to get free vaccines or send their kids, particularly their daughters, to school, like how people live in authoritative governments, or with high rates of extreme poverty. Every single parent who complained about online schooling during the pandemic should be thankful that at least schools were open. Every single school in Uganda was closed for a year during the pandemic, and no one had access to education. Story 25. The comforts of things like air conditioning, heating, and plumbing come to mind, but I also think freedom of speech is huge. We are allowed to be critical of our government without being arrested. Another thing is that for folks who can access healthcare, it is wonderful to have. I'm so grateful to have doctors who manage my chronic conditions, and I get my medications mailed to me via USPS. I also appreciate our postal system. It's not the fastest, but they will deliver. Our library system as well. Story 26. Spent 6 weeks in Central Asia 5 years ago, and that the water you showered in wasn't safe to brush teeth with made me a little nervous. NGL quickest showers ever. As someone who lived in American South and Southwest prior to that trip, lack of AC and rural isolation was expected but no ice? What? And we were literally in a place where Coca-Cola was hard to find. RC was king. I longed for ice and a can of Coke. But the water issues were real everywhere we went, even 5-star places. I felt like I was in a crazy version of the musical Urinetown as well, Alala. Story 27. The ability to make a mistake and recover from it. A lot of people don't realize how risky opening or taking control over a small business can be. While the US isn't perfect by any means, if your business flops, it doesn't mean you'll be completely screwed for the rest of your life. There are safety nets for people who do take risks financially, even if it isn't perfect. I've heard of people needing to take 3, 4 different business flops before they actually got their feet off the ground. Not many places in the world that allows you to do that. Story 28. Our best luxury is the Second Amendment. It makes it insanely easy to suicide by cop by just acting nervous or pulling your cell phone out because they can't take any chances, as it's a huge possibility you are, legally, carrying a gun. And open carry is cool too. Just look a certain way. And other legal gun owners will probably shoot you for walking into the grocery store for it. Shoot first, ask questions later. There isn't a rule more concrete than that in the wild, wild west. They will not be charged as they had reasonable suspicion to assume you were a threat. Euros have no clue what a relief it is having that option so readily available. Nah, I'm JK. Story 29. The lack of common corruption. To get things done, you don't have to bribe half a dozen random people, or laws mostly work for most people. And the rich and powerful are sometimes held accountable, just sometimes, which is better than never like it is in other parts of the world. I was just reading a story from Indian about a rich kid who ran over a couple while drunk. Nothing's happening to him. The police didn't do anything. The rich family is trying to just throw money at it. While here in America, that rich lady who ran over those boys is going to jail. Story 30. Cheap and 90% of the time bruise-free produce and fruits not only grown locally but all around the world. Same for meat. When I mean cheap, I mean compared the income generated. Same vein, food at restaurants, even with current increase, it's still relatively cheaper. How much cheap clothing is? I can buy made-in-India clothes that would likely be selling for higher value in India itself with direct dollar to rupee conversion. Story 31. Air conditioning and central air. In fact, lots of people still don't even have this. In fact, just food refrigerators were not even all that common until the 50s. If you were rich, otherwise it was the 60s, 70s, or 80s. Before this, you had to put big blocks of ice in your fridge. This is why some places still sell ice in blocks, like just one big block. At least they did well into the 90s and 2000s. I can't remember the last time I saw these, but if anyone remembers, comment. Story 32. A robust, highly developed, and omnipresent financial service sector. Access to a slate of retail banking services in pretty much any town that's large enough to have a post office. Access to a dizzying array of commercial and investment banking services in any major city. Easy access to credit, meaning low interest rates and low standards to qualify for a loan. And a variety of insurance products. Highly liquid stock and derivatives markets that virtually anyone with a bank account and a computer can participate in now through online brokerages with zero commission fees. That part is new. Wasn't like that 10 years ago. Bank runs and failures being so rare that they get 2-hour documentaries when they do happen. And of course, the fact that the local currency is the almighty US dollar. The global reserve currency standard, which can readily be exchanged for any other local currency at any bank in the world, no matter how remote. Now, functional retail banking isn't exactly rare in the developing world, but it's far from omnipresent. The rest of what I mentioned above might only be available in the capital city, to the upper classes, if those services even exist at all. Of course, American finance has a ton of problems. Banking deserts still exist, and economic inequality is still rampant and needs to be addressed. But damn, we Americans are so absurdly privileged when it comes to our financial system. Story 33. I've lived in several third-world countries, born in the US. And it's eye-opening the things we both complain about and take for granted. Garage is collected, and the US is very clean. We shit in better water than so many people drink. Our food is so clean, warm water AC units, having a car as being normal. Sanitation in general. The list goes on, but these basic things people don't even realize how bad it is. Story 34. The amazingly massive amount of widely varied natural beauty that is the United States. Swamps, we got 'em. Mountains, ooh, we got those too, and deserts and rainforests and prairies, 2 different coasts, tons of different climates, volcanoes, hot springs, glaciers, and more, beavers and buffalo and bears, oh my. You can go fossil hunting, gemstone digging, gold panning, arrowhead hunting, shell collecting, and rock hounding. A person could literally spend years just finding cool new stuff to do. Pick an interest and you can travel the states indulging in it. Quirky museums, waterfalls, weird roadside attractions, amusement parks, national and state parks, caving, water activities, extreme sports, really, whatever strikes your fancy, we've got it. Story 35. Bathrooms everywhere, at least in the state I'm from. I went to New York a few years ago and had a very hard time finding public restrooms to use. We had to stand in line at a Starbucks for over an hour for our kids to use the restroom. And this was after spending a large sum in food. In my state, there are restrooms accessible pretty much every few miles. In my home country, you cannot find a public restroom anywhere.